It's time for the Maximum PC No BS podcast, episode 237 for the week of March 18th, 2015. On this week's episode, we're going to be talking about Titan X, GDC, GTC, Valve's VR headset, and more. And here we go. Thanks for listening. I'm your host, Jimmy Thang, and joining me are tech editor Tom McNamara.
Hello.
Looking very low over there, Tom. I don't know if it's your seat.
I think it's my seat. I should probably adjust it.
You have editor-in-chief Tuan Nguyen.
Hello.
And introducing Maximum PC's newest cast member, associate editor Alex Campbell.
Hello.
And Alex, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself to us? You know, sort of tell us your background, your PC background, your knowledge, and all that stuff.
Well, my PC background, I've been building and playing with PCs since I was a kid. My first game was actually Wolfenstein 3D.
Nice.
Back in the day, you know, as a wee kid, and
It's the first 3D shooter, right?
exactly. So I've had, first-person shooters have always had a special place in my heart because of that. And in the Doom series, Doom 1, Doom 2. And I built my first PC when I was in middle school, beginning of high school, to play Quake 3 Arena. And I studied computer science in school for a couple of years in community college. Then I dropped out, joined the military. And when I got out of the military, I went to journalism school, and I've, never stopped being a geek. I still program. I'm a big Linux geek now. And I don't really buy pre-manufactured desktop computers. I know they're fine, but personally I like the experience of building them. It's more satisfying to know that you've built something with your own hands and you've actually put everything together and making it work. Even in Linux, where you have a lot more problems, especially with drivers and things like that. Getting things to work is a lot more satisfying when you've had to work for it.
I'm lazy, so...
Yeah, I mean, if I wanted a laptop to just work, I'd get a MacBook Air. But, I've got a Lenovo, and I've got Arch Linux on it, and there's a lot of things that don't work, but a lot of things that do work, and it's pretty nice, so...
on that note, a lot of people are going to be like, wait, what did you just say there? And then people are going to be like, what's going on here? So, Tuan, do you want to address what's going on there real quick?
So, originally I was just going to make up some BS about why I have this in front of me, but I think I'll just tell the truth. I actually said in my greeting, my first article on the website, that I do carry around an Air for traveling, just because it's really light. There's no
like
doubt
3
about that.
pounds, aren't they?
And the battery life on this thing is just insane. So I can sit at a coffee shop for 14 hours.
Yeah,
and it won't die.
If you took the keyboard off, there'd be like 90% battery underneath. It's pretty crazy.
So, and Core i5. So really, it's a PC at the end of the day. So it just has that.
Just happens to have Mac OS on it.
Yeah. So.
Okay.
But my PC at home and at work, I built those. So.
I was thinking about, I don't know really jack shit about Mac OS, so I was thinking about maybe doing an experiment or something like that where I use a MacBook for like a week to see what it's like on the other side. And
you could, or you can build like a Hackintosh.
Yeah, you could do that.
Part of me has always kind of wanted to do that because it's still technically a PC.
It is.
Hardware-wise. It's completely still a PC. You're just choosing a different OS like you would with Linux or BSD or anything else.
That's what
it's
a Mac is, right? It's a
then
PC. It's in a nice box.
not if you listen to Steve Jobs.
And then with the
PCs
Hackintosh, you can
dead.
easily dual boot into Windows or Linux.
Right, exactly.
But actually, Steve Jobs did say that on an interview, that a Mac is still a PC. It's in a nice box, but what it really is Mac OS. It's just software.
Right. It's software, and it's also finely tuned to the hardware they choose.
Right.
You can use other hardware, but they're really specific about the hardware they do use, so that they have the luxury of optimizing for that hardware because they don't have to worry about a whole lot of different hardware getting into the system.
Yeah, this is turning into like Mac Life's podcast.
Yeah.
Don't worry, guys. I'm still on your side. So
Yes. Please don't turn off the podcast.
To be fair, I've never actually owned a Mac, so.
I've actually never owned an Apple product up until I started working here, and then they gave me iPhone.
I had an iPad Mini, no, iPod Mini classic, the old school one from like when they were still using
the click wheel.
Yeah, mechanical hard drives too.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
Wow.
before the solid state version. So
I had a couple iPhone 3GSs. I think one was broken somehow or stolen. I can't remember. One got run over by an RV at Burning Man.
on purpose or?
No, it actually fell out of my pocket, and it was in an OtterBox.
Okay,
Right. So I
wow.
go back to go find it, and I actually find it like in the dirt, and it'd been like smashed, and the screen looked fine. It just didn't function.
Oh,
Like it was
wow.
just
Oh, wow.
done.
That's
You know.
sad.
And third one finally just I got sick of replacing iPhones, so I bought an Android. So
How does that solve the problem? Like,
don't
like
know.
losing your phone and.
Well, you get a back button, which is nice.
right,
Yeah,
I had a back
that's
button.
true.
I have a removable battery. I
Yeah.
can put in. I can expand the storage.
Yeah,
Which
and
is
SD
amazing.
card slots go a long way.
Yeah, they do.
Right.
So
It's true.
Anyways, you also worked for IDG before, right? So like,
right, I worked for PC World. I was a how-to editor for a little while there. So I worked with John Phillips, who used to be editor-in-chief here. The original editor-in-chief here, who I've been talking to over Twitter most of the day, and there's been a great conversation about semicolons. He hates semicolons.
This is I never
It's
knew-
super word geeky, but it's just basically John raging about semicolons, and a couple other writers and editors poking fun at him for it.
Yeah, apparently he hates them. I don't.
Yeah, there was a quote by some author somewhere that's
mean-
saying you shouldn't use semicolons because it's just a fancy way of saying you went to college or something like that. I forget the author. It was like Mark Twain or something like that. It's weird.
I try to choose my battles. I hate people who drive slow in the fast lane. I think that's a good hate to have. But I don't think hating semicolons is healthy because they're unavoidable.
All right, cool. I was just going to move on to the next topic. One big announcement NVIDIA made yesterday was they officially revealed the Titan X and its price. And Tom, you had a day one review of the GPU. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
I sure did. They came out right as the embargo lifted at noon on Tuesday, March 17th, because they gave us a card ahead of time and some drivers ahead of time. So I was able to benchmark it at 1080p, 2560 by 1440, and 4K, which in this context is 3840 by 2160 rather than 4096 by 2160. There's two different versions of 4K.
I still don't know what the 4K resolution.
Well, one of them, the 3840 by 2160 is a 16 by 9 ratio.
Okay.
And then 4096 by 2160 is a 16 by 10 ratio.
Gotcha.
So that's how that works.
And you gave it a very high score of a 9 kick-ass, I believe, right?
Yeah, it's the fastest single GPU card that we've ever seen by a pretty wide margin. Which I was hoping it would be, considering that it costs like $1,000.
$1,000, yeah. Same price as our Titan.
So
Titan.
is it much better than the 980, the GTX 980?
I mean, it depending on the game, it's like 20 to 30% faster.
Oh wow.
But
So-
for like twice as much price, right?
Right. I mean, you get diminishing returns. It's like those Intel CPUs back in the day, where the top end chip for the regular desktop was around $1,000, even though you're only getting like 5 to 10% more performance than the second fastest Intel CPU. So,
You do get what? How much VRAM's in there?
12
Well,
gigabytes.
That's a lot.
Yeah.
So a lot of people were speculating that the card was going to be
Is it 12 or 11.5, Tom? Tell the truth.
A lot of people were speculating that the card was going to cost like $1,250 or $1,350 because it had so much VRAM on it. Like twice as much as the previous Titans, but now they still charge $1,000 for it, or $999 according to their official pricing metric.
Right. And it's based on Maxwell, whereas the previous Titan, I think, is based on
Yeah.
Kepler,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. So NVIDIA says that the shader processors, or CUDA cores, as they like to call them, are 40% faster than the ones in the Kepler generation. So although there isn't a very large jump in the number of CUDA cores between like the original Titan and the Titan X, you're actually getting a lot more performance because the CUDA cores are each moving a lot faster. So.
I mean, I think the nice thing about having all that VRAM is it's probably really good for 4K monitor, right? Which requires, is more demanding on VRAM.
I haven't done any specific testing on VRAM consumption at high resolutions. I mean, I've seen some reviews where it's it's using up to like 7.5 gigabytes, but then you have to measure active usage against just allocation. Sometimes the game or the operating system will see a bunch of VRAM and throw a bunch of stuff into the VRAM, but not actively use all of it, just in case. So you don't necessarily need 12 gigabytes just because the game is using 7.5 or 8 or 9 or 10.
So if I want to play 4K games, can I max this out at 60 FPS?
If you crank up all the settings to their maximum, in my experience, you couldn't reliably hit 60 frames per second. Of the games I tested, Batman Arkham Origins and Tomb Raider were 60 frames per second or more, but the rest of them were below that. But then again, like I said, I was running everything at its maximum preset using 4x multi-sample anti-aliasing. And at 4K, you arguably don't need 4x MSAA. You can get by probably 2x, or you can use NVIDIA's MFAA if the game supports that, or TXAA if the game supports that, or SMAA.
Right.
You have options.
Yeah, and also because just going back to what you said about the resolution thing, it's because the jaggies look less pronounced at that sharp of a resolution.
Right, because you basically have more pixels on the screen, so you have higher pixel density, so everything's getting squished down a bit more.
Well, I mean, the good thing is if you're playing this on a G-Sync display and you dip below 60, the G-Sync obviously helps that significantly.
But it's difficult for me to say that you can use that out, because then people are like, oh, so I need to buy this $800 monitor just to
but
compensate.
I think G-Sync is one of those technologies where you actually have to sit somebody down in front of it to let them experience the difference. Like you can explain it to them.
It doesn't show up well in video.
It doesn't. But when you do it, because I'm using a 4K G-Sync on my desktop, and I'm sure the games are not hitting 60, but I don't feel it.
Right.
I still feel it. Like
it's very weird. It's like even at 30 frames per second, it almost feels like 60.
Yeah, it's actually pretty good for gaming.
And then AMD's coming out with the FreeSync pretty soon.
Yeah.
I'm assuming they're going to time that with their next generation of video cards.
So actually, the we can say it now, but the NDA for that lifts tomorrow. This is not going to go up until at least then. So they're going to have some options out there by the time you're listening to this.
Cool.
And I have a friend, Chris Johnson is his name. He's really big into flight sims, and he's playing now Star Citizen.
Oh yeah.
Very heavily invested in Star Citizen, and he has 3 identical displays running on triple 780 Ti, a setup like that, and his frame rates chug because the VRAM on the 780 Ti's, they're only 3 gigabytes each card.
Yeah, so he's running into
and he's 1080p on each screen. That's a lot of megapixels right there. So he was asking me last night if the Titan X's with the 12 gigs of VRAM would alleviate that pain, because he's playing on triple displays.
Yeah.
So sometimes it's not even 4K that causes the problem. Sometimes
just high resolution output, right?
Yeah, multiple displays.
Your frame buffer basically runs out of space, and your video card spends a lot of time on memory management.
That game's also not out yet. It's not optimized, so.
Well, I mean, you can play it. It's fully playable right now. They're releasing it in modules.
Yeah. They're using a increasingly modified version of CryEngine.
Yep. They bought the license. To the engine.
Yeah. They're making a lot of changes. They're adding 64-bit stuff, whereas the engine just didn't have that before. So that's pretty interesting to see. But like you guys say, it's the game is still early days in terms of optimization and performance.
Driver support.
Well, it's still alpha.
Right.
But it's like the awesomest alpha you've ever played, because it's like they could have released it already, and it's like awesome.
Yeah, it's the whole like what status the game is in is kind of confusing, because there's the alpha of the persistent universe, which doesn't exist yet, and then there's different versions of Arena Commander and of the FPS module and of the social module. And so it remains to be seen what you consider like version 1.0 of the game. Mm-hmm. They've started to call the most recent version or the next version that's about to come out Star Citizen 1.1. And some people are like, well, it's not.
Yeah, but I think they announced that they were going to like release the public final sometime in 2016, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's. I think it's difficult to say at this point, because it's so far out. I don't know how
it's a never-ending developing game, I think.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I would prefer that they take their time.
Yeah.
And I think that they would prefer that as well. It's nice for them.
Did you invest? Did you?
I bought a few ships,
Oh.
and I'm glad that they don't have a publisher. They can move at their own pace.
How much did you spend on chips?
Probably more than I should have. I mean, not nearly as much as some people have. I've seen people spending thousands.
Well, my friend spent $25,000.
Yeah, I'm not.
Wait,
I'm
what?
Not,
What?
I think that's actually the most you can possibly spend on.
That's
on-
insane.
Yeah, there's a package called
Wait.
the Completionist.
Yeah,
And it's like
you get like multiple of every ship in the game. I think.
yeah,
Yeah.
and it's like the base price for that is $15,000.
Yeah. And Chris Roberts.
Wait, it's blowing my mind. $15,000 in-game purchase.
Yeah.
It's
Or
not-
for,
no.
not in-game, but for like for
If
in-game
you want to
items.
play the
Right.
game, you can spend like $35 and
Yeah.
get into the game, and you
Yeah.
can basically be an explorer, and you can make a career out of just being an explorer if you wanted to. But the game's all about ships.
Yeah.
It's totally gear-oriented game. It's about owning
Yeah.
things. And you can then purchase ships, and some that you can't purchase anymore. They were like limited.
Right.
And there's like ones that are like up to $100 and then a couple thousand. The package that my friend bought was like a game pack that included all the modules and a bunch of ships, and it's $15,000
But I want to.
That's
or
impressive.
$17,000.
That's
We-
insane.
We should say that you can get pretty much every ship in the game after it ships within in-game using in-game currency. You don't have to spend any more than
So it's not pay to
the
win.
$35, $40 that it takes.
Yeah, but you have to there's like a really in-depth economy where you have to actually work. You do stuff
Yeah.
to
Yeah.
make the in-game money.
Yeah.
So it's basically
So-
like taking a massive shortcut. It's like, you know what? I just
Yeah.
want to have the ships. I want to have the equipment. I want to have the gear.
Yeah, but
Yeah.
like
And-
for example, his ship, the biggest one that he has, it requires like 25 people to actually man that ship, like real
Yeah.
people. So you can't like operate it without.
I think
from
from what I understand, you can put NPCs
You
in
can.
some of those slots, but they don't expect them to operate as well as actual people.
That
Yeah.
seems like a headache trying to like wrangle up 24 of your other friends. Like, hey Tom, you're the
It's
last
like-
one,
it's like
man. I
a
need
World of
you.
War-
Can't fly
Yeah,
without you.
It's going to be like a World of Warcraft raid.
Yeah.
Well-
so are those positions on the ships? Because I mean,
Yes,
that was introduced. Like first time I saw that was really like Battlefield 1942, where you could have multiple people on a vehicle.
Yeah.
So do they actually have like engineering roles as opposed
Yes,
to just
yes,
gunners and stuff?
yes.
Okay, so it's functional roles that if without these people, this ship will not fly.
Yeah, they have navigation, radio operators, gunners, medics, infantry ready to board a ship. So multiple roles.
Okay.
Yeah.
So
And
it's
there's-
like Battlestar.
Yeah, but there's
Yeah.
there's situations where, let's say you, like Jimmy said, you can't, like your friend is away, but you need somebody to like man a turret because like some enemies are incoming.
Yeah.
You can do what they call agent smithing, which
Oh,
is
yeah.
like
Drop
like you
in,
have an NPC,
drop in,
but
drop out.
you can have somebody log in and take over that NPC.
Huh.
Yeah, and then like instead of like because let's say Jimmy logs in, but he's like on the other side of space, it's gonna take him like an hour to actually get to me, but he can agent smith my NPC.
So your
and-
NPCs become spawn points
Yeah,
basically
yeah,
for,
yeah.
for
for
characters.
friends. Yeah.
That's actually pretty innovative. I like that.
Just taking it back to the Nvidia real quick. In addition to the Titan X, there was a bunch of other stuff that Nvidia revealed yesterday at their GTC press conference, or conference rather. They really emphasized deep learning computers, so like computers that they showed off computers that could identify what objects were in an image, and then they could even describe to you, computers could then even describe to you what's in the image via like a written sentence.
Oh wow.
Yeah, so they actually showed off an
It's pretty
image.
crazy.
They showed off an image of like a bird perched up on a tree, and then the sentence was, "This is an image of a bird perched on a tree," and that was all done by the computer identifying what it was,
Right.
and then using its own syntax to describe that sentence.
And
Yeah.
how do you guys know it wasn't like pre-scripted or
Well, I
something?
mean,
We don't know for
yeah.
sure,
Yeah.
but
the gist of it was that they were using their Titan cards to calculate all this stuff.
Oh wow.
Be the brain of the system.
yeah. So in addition to that, they also revealed that they're going to be selling their own system to developers. It's called the Dev Box, and it comes with 4 Titan X's, and it's for $15,000.
Wow.
Sounds like a bargain.
Wow.
Sounds like
Yeah.
a dream machine to me.
Exactly.
Which
Yeah.
is, it's pretty interesting because I think afterwards they did like a Q&A or something like that, and then somebody was asking them like, why are you guys getting into the PC selling space? You guys have so many other partners that can do that. And then they were saying like, well, we want to have all the tools. So we built this. They basically say we built this internally for ourselves, for testing. And then other companies were like, we want something as well, but we don't want to like deal with building it, or we don't want to preload it with software and all that stuff. So Nvidia basically took care of that, and they're not trying to sell a bunch of PCs. It's just for like developers.
Like a dev kit, basically.
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, that's kind of smart. It standardizes a dev kit, so everyone's kind of on the same level, and you have a standard to build to.
Yeah, quality control.
Right. It's a
Right.
great QC method, I think, for developers
so,
to know
yeah.
that, okay, because console developers, they have the luxury of knowing, oh, this is the exact hardware I'm going to be using. This is what I got. With a PC game, you don't have that.
Mm-hmm.
You can have, okay, I've got DirectX 11, I've got, OpenGL, whatever, I've got, all these things I can work with, but it's still highly, highly variable depending on operating system, what updates have been added, how recent is the driver, all those things. So to push a development kit that's very standardized, I think is actually kind of a smart move.
Right. It is really expensive, but it is for not for consumers.
It's for dev shops. Yeah, it's not for consumers. So
right. And the other really big tidbit that they talked about is basically self-driving cars. So Nvidia is getting into that business as well with their PX driver GPU thing. And they had Elon Musk go on stage and talk about the future of self-driving cars. And Elon said some controversial things. He basically said he can see a future in which cars driven by humans will be outlawed, even because they're just too unsafe.
Dangerous and stuff. Wow.
What do you guys think about self-driving cars? I know when Gordon was here, he was like, "That's never gonna happen." I think I'm more optimistic about it.
I think it's good in a lot of different ways. Like maybe like a good portion of your time in the vehicle is very unproductive. And if you want to be productive, you can actually, do stuff like as if you were on a plane because somebody else is handling the flight for you.
Well, even on the plane, you have an autopilot that's doing most of the work.
Right.
You have the pilot and co-pilot are there to do a few tasks, but mostly to make sure nothing goes wrong.
Right.
So it's like they're like supervising the system rather than, manually operating every minute of the flight.
Right. But I think, in terms of just being productive, you can do that, or maybe take a nap or whatever. Just do something and not just stare at the road all the time.
Yeah, and sitting in traffic is stressful.
It is.
Yeah.
So.
Well, I mean, like, I think it's gonna happen if you ask me. But I think there will be a time in which somebody's gonna die, even with a self-driving car, and then when that first instance happens, it's gonna really set them back.
Oh yeah, I know.
Yeah. So.
Well, I think that the danger, just like if you go on the road and like, say, the morning after St. Paddy's Day when the bars close, right? Even if you didn't go out and party, the danger is all the other drivers on the road. It's not necessarily you.
Yeah. Sure.
So as good as the autopilot self-driving system is, there's a lot of people who don't have self-driving cars who probably won't for 20 years.
Yeah.
Just because they're going to own their pickup truck until it falls apart.
Right.
So you have to deal with humans, and humans are kind of unpredictable. Someone could have something happen, they could be startled, there could be a bee in their car, and they just swerve, and the computer may be able to compensate for that, but the computer may not spot the actual other person being distracted like you visually can. Like you can see someone doing their makeup in the car or on their phone.
Yeah.
Right.
A car can't yet, see that.
So I mean, this goes back to what I was saying about the example of the deep learning and then the bird perched up on the tree, was that they said that in time, these computers can like learn that stuff. They can see like women in car doing makeup. Could be distracted.
Or
you
a
know?
guy.
or guy, or guy doing makeup.
Sure.
Or or do
That's when I do
arguing
my
on
makeup.
Twitter. Yeah, exactly.
So
or someone who has kids and they're turning around trying to strangle them.
Well, the other one is you have cars parked on both sides of the street. You're driving down the street, and then maybe there's a kid who's on the sidewalk and is dashing into the street, but the car can't pick up on that because their vision is partially blocked by the parked cars.
Right.
And
that happens a lot, actually.
Yeah. That happens to people all the time.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
Well, there's another technology that was suggested that you have cars that are connected. I think Ford or somebody else was also talking about this, so that the sensors from one car say that's around the corner, it's kind of like a local network, a wireless local network, so that the next car that's coming up on that intersection gets the data from that car. So it has kind of a
it's like a network.
It's got like a network. It's got like a map, of what's going on. So it can predict things, but it still requires those cars to be enabled or to be connected, and for those systems to be, in enough cars for it to matter.
Right. Yeah. And I hope it's not proprietary, like it's only Ford Fiestas only or something like that.
Right.
Be cool if it was open source or something like that. Cool. And about 2 weeks ago, there was GDC, and I got to try out on Valve's VR headset, the Vive, also made in partnership with HTC. And
I was wondering how you pronounce that.
That's how I pronounce it, Vive.
Yeah,
Vive.
Vive. That was my guess, but I don't know.
I don't know. If somebody knows how to pronounce it, if it's not Vive,
yeah, there's Vive,
it's like
Vive,
like revive. There's something with the re in front of it. I don't know.
Okay.
I think people are pronouncing it the Vive. I think
we'll figure it out eventually.
Yeah, I'm just gonna call it the Vive until somebody tells me I'm wrong.
Okay.
And so I got to try it out, and the headset looks really sharp. But in addition to that, what was really interesting is that Oculus for a long time has said that VR, for them at least, is a seated experience, whereas with Valve, they set up a room probably a little bit bigger than this podcast room here, where I could walk around and look at virtual things in a virtual environment. And in addition to that, they had like these Razer Hydra-like controls, so I could walk around the environment and pick things up. And to me, it felt like the holodeck, man. Like if you guys are into Star Trek,
yeah.
It felt like for the first time I felt like this is what virtual reality should be like.
Wow.
So, are you guys excited about it?
I'm excited about the concept of VR just because of a lot of technologies it can be applied to. It can be applied. I mean, games is obviously it's going to be a completely immersive experience.
Have you had a chance to try out VR?
I've played with Google Cardboard. Once I got a chance. I haven't had a chance to play games on VR
I tried
system.
that out at GDC, I think, too, like very recently, 2 weeks ago, and I never tried it out before. I thought it was like a stupid thing, and it was actually surprisingly decent.
It's impressive.
Yeah.
And considering you're just using a cell phone, a cell phone display, and you look into it, you're like, oh wow, this actually is more immersive than I thought, and it's actually relatively smooth. Like you don't feel dizzy or anything. I was actually kind of amazed. I was just enjoying looking around the scene. So I thought that was really cool.
Well, I know Jimmy has a DK2 that he's been guarding jealously.
Oh, and it's just I left that at my house.
That's what he keeps saying. I just forgot it.
I'm not using it right now. If you want to borrow it.
Yeah, I could just hide in your trunk and
I'm just playing Elite Dangerous all the time, just stuck in VR in space.
Did you order it for yourself?
Yeah, we got it a while back.
Jimmy can quit anytime.
Not for myself. It's for the office.
Oh.
Yeah.
Cool.
I could bring it in. Alex, you can try it.
Yeah, definitely have to do that, especially with the system I'm building for work to test peripherals. So that'll be cool. That's a peripheral to me. Is it a peripheral or display? Which?
It's considered a HMD, head-mounted display, I guess.
Yeah.
I mean, what do you think about it, Tuan?
Oh, I think it's both because.
I mean, like about VR.
About VR in general.
VR and Valve solution there.
I didn't get to try the Valve solution, but you have Yeah, I have.
Okay.
It's quite dramatically better than the DK2, but apparently it has nothing against what you even
So I would say like the resolution, like the actual HMD head-mounted display, it's pretty on par, but like with Valve solution, it's really unique because they put they have these boxes called lighthouses that you put on opposite ends of the room, and these lighthouses emit basically invisible lasers throughout the room that you can't see. And then on your headset, there's a bunch of sensors that can detect these lasers. And these lasers are dumb. They're just being plugged into the wall. They're not being plugged into your PC. So what you get is like 100% one-to-one tracking. So like with the controllers also have these sensors as well. And the problem with like something like the Razer Hydra, is that it's always been like on a rough approximation of where your hand should be, right? So sometimes if you're watching this on the video feed, your hand might be here, but then like you're holding a gun here, but then in the game, like your hand might be over here. And then it just kind of like does this thing where it's like, it's kind of accurate, but it's still a guessing kind of thing. But then with Valve solution, because it's using the lasers and it's using the sensors, your head is exactly where your head should be, and your hand is exactly where your hand should be. And so this just like this, it sounds like it's a little addition, but it just adds so much to the feeling of presence.
Oh wow.
So
Well, I mean, they were always, Valve was always very adamant that presence was the key to achieving presence. It was the key to actually feeling immersed. So
right. And there was one demo that I did in there. It was like a cooking simulator or something like that, and it looked sort of like Surgeon Simulator, like cartoony graphics. But they placed me in a kitchen, and there was like on the wall there was like instructions on how to make a soup. And it required like me to put in like tomatoes and like mushrooms into like a big pot. And then so I'd just be like standing in front of this table, and then I look down like, okay, here's tomatoes, and I take tomatoes and I put it in the pot, and I walk over to the pot and I put it down in there, and then I like look for the mushrooms on the other side of the table, and so I walk over there and I grab it and I put it in. Then I'm like looking for the other half of the mushroom, and I'm like, I don't know where it is. So it's on the other side of the room, so I walk over and open up like this fridge, and then now like, oh crap, it's in there. So then I take it and I walk across the room, put it in the pot. And then I'm like, oh, I'm finished. So then I walk to the other side of the room, and then I ring the bell, indicating that dinner's ready. And like I'm walking around, and I'm opening doors, and I'm putting things, and I'm looking at it as if I'm there. And I'm like, holy fuck, this is unreal. So when I think about it, like I don't think about it like a video game. I think about it like I almost dream about it like I was there. You know, it's very weird.
It seems like a really amazing training tool for a wide variety of different occupations.
Oh, yeah.
Jobs. In addition to games, like gamifying training. Because then you can time things accurately. You can figure out, okay, how well did you solve this problem? And you can replay it. Whereas like any other type of training, say you're training to be a mechanic or something, you know, you can't replay what someone did wrong, but you could replay this to someone. You know, someone could watch this video over again, you know, and figure out, oh, you were supposed to do this here.
Right. Or you could, like, I mean, you were in the military, right? Did you do any, I know the military does a lot of VR experimentation, stuff like that. Did you ever come across that?
We never really got to. There's one piece of equipment where it's basically they have replicas of weapons that you would use, but it's air pneumatic powered. So it's like kind of like, guns? It's air pneumatic powered. They're hooked up to air hoses, but it's tied to a game. So you have like a laser output on the weapon, and then you have a screen. So you go through a scenario, but it's really not that immersive. Like it's not, it's kind of predictable. Mm-hmm. The scenarios are predictable. It's not programmed very well. You can't move around. You're in one space. So it's almost like being in an arcade. Playing like Time Crisis with the gun. Shooting at the screen. It's almost like that.
Yeah.
So being able to do this, where you could, for police or military, being able to actually train and gamify something, and score someone on how well they are able to perform, time to react and how they react to different things, and be able to have different players, react off them. So you could have, in the military they call it OP4, opposing force. So you could have someone playing the OP4, or playing a civilian, or playing someone who's holding up a store or something, I don't know. And to have that trainer be part of the experience, where you have this multiplayer experience, and then have the trainee have to react to that, that's a powerful training tool. And then the fact you can do this over distance, over networks, is really economical too. It means you don't have to send, someone to a faraway school to do something. You can train them locally.
Right.
And review locally, and you can have the instructor somewhere far away.
Right. And you don't have to use like physical props too.
Right.
Maybe you don't have to build the environment out. You can do it virtually.
I mean, there's some things you always are going to need to do physically.
Well, you need a room.
Yeah, exactly. Well, yeah, I mean, like hand-to-hand stuff, you're always going to have to do that physically.
Right.
But as far as procedure and interacting with people, maybe servicing certain pieces of equipment. I could see like a lot of applications for pilots, a more immersive flight simulator. So
definitely.
So they don't have to build a whole simulator box off of one aircraft. They can build a relatively generic space and have someone, have the headset, so they get full 360 degrees. So they can look at any part of the aircraft they want, and the illusion of being in an aircraft isn't broken. So,
yeah, I was actually talking to a VR developer at GDC, and they were saying that actually jet fighter pilots actually have the most sophisticated VR right now, and it's like what they use is actually much more advanced. It's like 2-3 years out in front of what we have now. So that's kind of interesting.
fascinating.
Oh wow.
Yeah.
Well, I would love to be able to get in a simulator and play with that.
I'm learning how to fly in space right now, Elite Dangerous. So I'll be ready when we need to leave Earth. Another thing that Valve revealed at GDC, well, they've revealed it before, but they've kind of reconfirmed that their Steam machines will be coming out, and they'll be coming out in November. And they showed us like 14 different boxes, all ranging from $500 to like $5,000, $15,000 or something like that. Crazy.
Yeah.
And I know, Tuan, you weren't actually too big on it because you were actually more sold on, I believe, Nvidia's Shield console thing, right?
Yes. Even though I was previously involved in the Steam Machine project with Valve before, but
When you were at
iBuyPower, yeah. But when I saw Nvidia's Shield console, I was really like impressed because not due to maybe the console itself, but actually the tie-in with Grid.
Yeah, that's streaming.
And there's been streaming services before, like OnLive and stuff like that, Gakai, and now Sony's doing that PlayStation Now thing. But I think Nvidia has kind of found a well-balanced solution where you can play very high-quality local Android games, and these are not the Android games found on your phone. These are like AAA title made for the Android platform for Shield.
But they're actually just kind of ports of PC games, right?
Yeah, but they're ports that are really well done. It's not just like, a dumbed down
I don't
experience.
know, that Borderlands one looked kind of rough to me on the FPS.
Yeah.
It was like a smooth 30, and I was like, this is dipping into the 20s, I'm sure.
But I do think that there's a big future in streaming, whether or not it's Grid or something else. That is kind of what I see happening, because it really removes a lot of bottlenecks. Now, I guess it introduces another bottleneck, which is your
Bandwidth.
internet, connection, latency, what have you. And most PC gamers, and I would say most, if not all, of Maximum PC readers, like would be concerned with latency and stuff like that.
I think with the Shield, during the presentation that they gave a couple weeks ago, they said that to get 1080p 60 with the Grid system, you needed like 25 megabits per second or more.
Yeah.
Otherwise, it would knock down to 720p
720,
60.
Yeah. So,
Yeah.
but with the new, FCC classification of what broadband is, most people should have that.
I mean, that's actually really exciting because you have the possibility, Google Fiber, of course, is coming to a lot of cities, and the possibility for municipalities now to compete with,
Big players.
Comcast, who nobody likes. That opens a lot of doors because it's like, okay, we can have real competition, and I think gamers and everyone will really benefit highly from, having a common carrier. Your gaming experience won't take backseat to Netflix, someone else's Netflix stream.
But I think, going back to the Shield and Grid experience, I think that will help something like that, a Grid service. Yeah. And I was impressed. I was impressed with how fluid the streaming games were. Nvidia had demoed both local play and streaming service at GDC, and GDC arguably is not the best place to have an internet connection to demo things, but they played really well.
The live stream that people saw over the internet may have looked a little chunky, but in person, when you were watching the stuff on stage, it was pretty smooth.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I was largely impressed, and it worked really well.
For some reason, the internet connections at conferences are notoriously terrible.
Well, I think there's just so many people trying to connect as well that it probably complicates things.
Yeah, so Nvidia is basically trying to be like the Netflix of game streaming.
That's what they literally said.
Yeah.
I feel like without, in the PC space anyways, without like Valve's busing, it's going to be an uphill battle, because I think PC games nowadays, I think it's just more than let's play this game. It's about like a sense of community. It's like cloud saves and things like that. I mean, I've experimented with Grid myself. I've reviewed 2 Shield devices now, and it feels like when you're streaming, it feels like, bandwidth issues aside, it feels like you're kind of like playing out in a bubble, like nobody else is like interacting with you, and like multiplayer experiences still need to be like worked out and things like that. What do you guys think about that issue?
I haven't really tried Grid that much in terms of multiplayer experiences. I mean, it's very single player stuff that I've tried. For those things, it works really well. But I think Nvidia and others like Nvidia who are in this space will eventually solve those. Those are just things that will be solved in software and in the cloud.
Yeah, but what about like community? Like it's kind of hard to solve that problem if all your friends are on Steam and you're like, come on, play on the Shield platform, guys.
Yeah, the Google Plus effect.
But it's not.
All your friends. All your friends are in one place, but you start playing another place. It's like chicken or the egg. You know who. You know, what's more.
Well, isn't that what you get when you own multiple gaming consoles too, like a PlayStation and an Xbox, but the PlayStation can't interact with the Xbox.
So people are like, I like the PS4, but all my friends are on Xbox.
Yeah.
So I'm saying it's not impossible, but I feel like there's definitely uphill battle that a lot of people aren't considering there.
There's a lot of competition for people's attention as well, like including Netflix itself. It might be tough for them to break in.
So we'll see.
Cool.
It's exciting to see where it'll go. So it's be there to see it.
Do you think so? Like right now, at least with software, like Adobe and stuff like that, they're moving to the cloud. What have you? I personally like having the fat client, the client on my PC.
Yep.
Mm-hmm. Do you think people will feel the same about games as well? Maybe not so much with single player games, but maybe if there's like a multiplayer game, it's like I'd want to own that so I can go back to it.
I personally like to have a copy of whatever it is I purchased. I don't like it. I don't like renting it. And then, what happens if the service goes down? I can't play the game that I paid for. But, games like World of Warcraft and others that rely heavily on community, it's all run cloud-based. And if the servers go down, basically you're stuck. You can't really play. But League of Legends has proven that, the world wants to play together. So I think that's the way most games are going to be programmed.
Yeah. From what I understand, one of the reasons that OnLive failed was because they were asking full retail prices for games, but you weren't actually owning them. You were just being slotted to be able to stream them over the internet. And it looks like Nvidia is doing that same thing with Shield. I mean, they have apparently an all-you-can-eat library for a price they have not revealed yet.
Well, so at 720p, 30 frames per second, that's going to be free, right?
I don't know. I mean, that I think that depends on your connection speed. I don't think that they're going to limit you based on price. I think if you do like the monthly fee, or if you pay for a single title, then that's what's going to be the determinant.
I think it was. I could be wrong, but I think it was 720p, 30 frames per second. They're gonna cap you at that for the free service, and then if you wanted to get the 1080p, 60 frames per second, then that's gonna be some subscription fee.
I mean that makes sense because that kind of bandwidth is pretty expensive.
Yeah, I think it's a pretty good model. So to get people to adopt, you don't have to pay anything, you get the stream.
Yeah,
it's not the greatest quality at 30 frames per second, but
is there like a time limit on that? Because if you can do that all the time, I mean that's not a bad.
I think as far as I can understand, that's I mean
that's not a bad way to demo the system if that's the case.
Right. Yeah. All right, let's move on to some reader questions. Angry Aaron at Rennie Arts asks, he's running two 660 Ti's at the moment. What should I upgrade for VR, or should I just wait until Pascal is out before upgrading? So I think the VR it's tough because with VR basically the game the graphics card has to render the game twice, right? You have to also have a very high refresh rate. For instance, for Valve's Vive and Oculus, they're targeting at least 90 frames per second. So you have to basically get 2x 1080p resolution running at 90 frames per second.
That's pretty challenging.
It is very demanding, and also it depends on the game as well. So I don't know. Should he wait? Should he upgrade now? He didn't really mention his budget, either.
Well, for those of you who don't know, Pascal is the purported Nvidia generation that's going to come out after Maxwell, and it's purportedly going to have this super high bandwidth memory that we are purportedly going to see in the 390X from AMD. So that's all pretty far out right now. But I would definitely I'm in wait and see mode as far as what kind of performance you can get, because it looks like we're just on the verge of seeing some really interesting stuff from AMD. And then by the time we start seeing a lot of VR enabled titles, then I think Nvidia will have come out with its Pascal or whatever they end up calling it.
Well, I think Palmer Luckey of Oculus said that consumer level VR won't be out until like the tail end of 2016 at least. So
Valve's thing's coming out in November.
Oh, this November.
Yeah.
Yeah, but based on what other people in VR have been saying in terms of graphical requirements and stuff like that, I mean, that's 90 frames per eye at 1080p. I think that having good performance VR and not just lackluster stuff is probably going to be like 2 generations GPUs away.
Probably.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's going to depend on what settings you play in it as well, and the game experience.
Yeah.
I mean, I would probably say wait right now because like we don't even have VR headsets that are available for consumer consumption, anyways. And I noticed he has 2 video cards, and I didn't know this until GDC, but apparently SLI or Crossfire setups, and AMD is trying to fix this, and I'm sure Nvidia is as well. But SLI setups are actually hinder VR performances because they're optimized for power throughput as opposed to latency. And latency is what you really want to mitigate because if you have really bad latency, then you get like motion sick and you start throwing up. So AMD is trying to fix that issue, and I didn't know that was a problem up until GDC. So right now, I'd say wait. It doesn't hurt to wait.
I mean, I would say wait because that way, one, you can save your money over time, so you'll actually be able to afford the equipment. And second of all, even if your budget is still roughly the same, by the time you save up and by the time you start seeing more VR headsets come out, the equipment, the early equipment will have dropped in price. So you can possibly get a better deal, on being able to run it at the bare minimum required to have a good experience if you wait on it a little bit.
Best single GPU right now to get if he were to try to plop down today?
Well,
probably a 980, right?
Well,
I mean, the Titan X is like,
if price is
obviously,
no object, then the Titan X would be
realistically,
the way to go.
maybe the 980.
980, yeah. I mean, I think AMD is coming out with some stuff, and it appears to be happening so quickly that I wouldn't buy a super high-end card right today, unless you didn't care what AMD has going. If you're like, I'm Nvidia, then the 980 is fine.
Yeah, he's running Nvidia cards right now, so I don't know if
maybe he wants to stick with them, in which case the 980 is probably a good bet. Yeah.
Okay. Next question comes from Eric VM at EricVM. What is the best air cooler for my AMD 7850 APU FM2 Plus socket? Big is okay.
I would go with like the 212, the Hyper 212 Evo from Cooler Master. You can get that for $30 to $35. It's really reliable, fairly easy to install. It's not too loud. It's a pretty popular cooler.
I think Fantex makes like a really kick-ass one too, right?
Yeah, there's cost like anywhere from $65 to $85, and they emphasize quiet. And they are super quiet coolers, but if that's not like a big factor to you, then you can get the 212 Evo for a lot less.
What would you use though? Would you use it like an all-in-one cooler? Or
yeah, I'd probably use
liquid.
Yeah, I'd probably use like a 200. Well, for this type of CPU, you'd probably be fine with like a 120 millimeter radiator. I think anything other than that, bigger than that, would probably be overkill.
So currently, on our best of the best section for air cooler, we're recommending the Fantex PH TC14 PE.
Yeah.
Not the most catchy name. But the 212 is a lot cheaper and performs not as good but close.
Right.
So if you're looking for value, I'd say probably go for that.
Yeah. And it comes to one fan. You can add another fan if you want to.
Yeah. I don't know in which situation now why he wants an air cooler as opposed to a water cooler, because water coolers aren't that much more expensive. And
well, some people have worries or concerns about
leakage.
Leakage, and they are 2 to 3 times more expensive than the 212 Evo. So there's also a cost consideration. It's like, is it worth it to me?
He didn't mention price, so I think if price is not a huge problem for you, if you don't mind spending like $50 more or something like that.
Yeah, I mean, you can get like an H75 or an H80i from Corsair. Yeah. Probably be pretty good. Silverstone just came out with the TD03-E, although that one looks a tad bulky. So I'd make sure that your case dimensions can support like a radiator with a fan on it. Size-wise.
Cool. Next question comes from Sean Zilla. Would you go with an SLI 980 or a single Titan X? That's a very interesting question. They're both about the same price, right? Titan 980 is $500 right now, if I'm not mistaken.
I mean, it depends on your screen resolution. If you're just playing 1080p, then you're fine with the 980.
The single 980, really.
Right. Yeah, you wouldn't. I mean, your second 980 would mostly go to waste at a resolution that relatively low.
Yeah,
If you're talking about 2560,
you could still probably go with the 980. Could probably still do it. Like a single 980 probably.
Yeah,
still do
I
it.
mean, it depends on what settings you're putting your game at. You know, you could go either way. I mean, I would tend to favor the Titan X because it's simply easier to deal with a single GPU than
Sure.
SLI, because sometimes the game doesn't support it at all, or sometimes the support is glitchy.
Right.
you
Yeah.
know.
Scaling is not always
Yeah.
100% either.
Yeah, and the SLI 980 SLI will draw more power and generate more noise than a single Titan X. So that's also something to consider.
And also, like with the Titan X, you get more upgrade longevity as well, right? If you wanted to add a second Titan X, if you had another $1,000.
Yeah, you can always go that route.
But the fact that this guy's asking about these cards, maybe he does have deep pockets. I don't know.
Yeah.
It'd be kind of interesting too. Like just on a related subject, there are rumors going around that the new DirectX is going to allow VRAM to stack.
Yeah.
I don't know. Have you guys heard anything about that?
I've heard that as well. I don't think Microsoft has said anything to confirm or deny it, unfortunately.
Didn't they also say that it would allow different GPUs to run?
Yeah, allegedly you could
Yeah.
combine an AMD card and an Nvidia card, which
That's
That
gonna
seems
do
more
well.
far-fetched
like,
to me.
That seems like heresy, probably
Yeah.
to both camps.
Maybe you get the best of both worlds. You get. I was gonna say Mantle, but then Mantle's kind of like gone
Dead.
now.
Yeah,
Yeah.
well, I wouldn't say it's dead, but
It's-
it's
it's
clear that AMD is not actively
Pushing
working
it.
on future versions
I
of it.
think, I think what their AMD is saying is the Mantle DNA is in Vulkan now, which is basically then the newest version of OpenGL. So there was some good that came out of that.
I don't see a reason to actually combine two different GPUs from two different companies into one
Yeah.
system. It's just weird.
It just seems like you're asking for trouble.
Yeah, and that
Yeah.
it
Like
would
who do you
prob-
contact with support? You know,
Yeah,
so you
'cause
kind
neither of them will support you. Like, oh,
Yeah.
really?
And then you're mixing
You're
drivers
using-
too. Yeah.
Yeah.
They would hang up the phone.
I don't believe that one. That one I don't believe.
Yeah.
The VRAM stacking would be awesome though.
Yeah.
Yeah, that'd be really cool.
And it was just kind of interesting, like in regards to DirectX, what is this, 12 now? Microsoft was telling me that it's going to be backwards compatible with old hardware.
Yeah, I mean, there's compatibility with the API, and then there's also compatibility with all the features that the API brings. And apparently, you can be compatible with the API, but not be compatible with the complete feature set.
Okay.
So when they say DirectX 12, you have to ask them, do you mean all the features, or do you mean just the basic compatibility? So
Has this been done? Regardless, has this been done before, or is this like a pretty new thing for?
it
Because I know
sounds-
with like DirectX 11, you had to have a DirectX 11 card.
yeah, pretty
Physical
much.
card.
So I'm pretty sure it's a new thing, or at least it's something they have done a long time.
Yeah. That's
So.
the impression that I got as well.
Yeah, if
Yeah.
your card doesn't have the instruction set that's required by DirectX, then you're not going to get that. You know, it
Right.
doesn't really. It can be compatible with the rest of the API that your card does support, so that
Mhm.
you're not left out. So you can still play it, still operable, but it's
Right.
you're going to miss out on those extra features, like you said.
Yeah.
Cool. I think we got one last question here. Robert J. Armitage asks, he's looking to change his setup. He's currently running two GTX 670s 4GB cards in SLI, running surround at 5760 by 1080, and he's getting real tired of both SLI and surround issues in games. He's thinking of going back to a single video card and single gaming monitor. He'll need at least a 1440 screen or better and be able to play most of the titles on high or better. Any recommendations for what he should be using?
Well, assuming that he's talking about 2560 by 1440 instead of 1440 by 900, there's all kinds of resolutions you can choose from. Unfortunately, it gets confusing. But if he's talking about 2560 by 1440, then
980, right?
980, 290X, maybe a 290, maybe a 970. But I would lean towards the 980 and the 290X.
There's rumors right around the corner that AMD might reveal 390X as well.
Yeah.
I mean, maybe you should wait for that.
Yeah.
I heard that's going to be like on par or better than a Titan X.
Yeah, I mean, there's those purportedly leaked benchmarks
Yeah.
that show it being as fast, if not faster, while costing allegedly $550.
So
Wow.
here's an interesting
Yeah.
question for you, Tom, because I mean you saw those leaked benchmarks while you had the Titan card.
Purportedly leaked.
Uh,
That's the thing. is you
sure,
don't-
sure.
So it's hard to confirm.
Would you say that? My question to you is like, would you say that those? I know the numbers weren't, the stats weren't exact, the specs weren't exactly accurate, but would you say it's pretty accurate?
Well, how do you mean? What do you mean by accurate?
So
Like-
the Titan X, would you say that their benchmarks? I forget what the publication that leaked it, but would you
Yeah.
say that their specs were
Well,
benchmarks were pretty accurate to what you were seeing? This just leads credibility to maybe what they were saying with the 390 as well.
Well, yeah. I mean, in those benchmarks, the Titan X seemed to be scaling realistically against the other cards who we know exist.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
So you would say that like their numbers were fairly accurate. I'm just trying to get
Yeah.
see how reliable
they looked
390 is.
realistic.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then you said, according to them, I haven't actually read the story, but the 390X was actually performing slightly better than Titan X.
Yeah. But I think it was drawing like a little bit more power. Again, allegedly.
Okay.
So I think we'll know pretty soon what the deal is with AMD's next generation.
Cool, man. It's good to see. If it's true, I hope it's true, and it's good to see AMD back in the fight.
Yeah.
We need competition.
Well, the
stuff like that.
290X is still
It's
a
still
pretty
good
nice
card,
card.
yeah.
It came out in October 2013, but it's still. I mean, you can see from the benchmarks from the Titan X review that I did up on our website. It's still a pretty respectable card.
How much is the card now?
It's down around $350-ish. It's about
Okay.
the same price as the GTX 970, but it seems to perform faster pretty much across the board.
And it's also got like 4 gigs of RAM too.
Yeah.
If you
but at the same time, the 290X draws like twice the power as a GTX 970, so that's something else to consider. I would recommend like a very high quality 550 watt power supply or maybe 600 watt or maybe even 650 watt power supply, depending on what quality it is, for the 290X or the 290, because they draw a lot more power.
Sweet. All right, that about wraps it up. So we'll just go ahead and nip it in the bud here. You can check us out online at MaximumPC.com. You can follow us on Twitter and Facebook. If you want to be part of the conversation, you can email us at MaximumPCPodcast@gmail.com. You can send us a message at our 24-hour No BS podcast hotline at 1-877-404-1337, extension 1337. You can subscribe to us on Google Play, iTunes, Kindle, Nook, and Zinio. On behalf of the Maximum PC crew, I'm Jimmy Thang, and thank you for listening.